System Analysis to Enlightenment by Venerable Rungruang Papa's Sorrow, Dr. Rungruang Limchopadipa. The insight observation on the four mindfulness foundations is the way to study the whole complex system of life by establishing mindfulness to make insight observation on mental phenomena at the foundations of body, feeling, and mind, respectively, and then performing research on Dharma in terms of functional analysis on each mental phenomenon and structural analysis on the relationship of these mental phenomena as follows. Functional analysis on each phenomenon. The five aggregates of being and the three common characteristics of nature. The description of the world, and the deterioration of the bodies of all beings. During performing the insight observation, we will experience with various kinds of mental phenomena, and we will realize that these observed mental phenomena arise and fade away within a short period of time. All beings who are born to the world will live for a while with aging, and eventually they're going to die anyway. No matter how much we would like to live as long as possible, but we have to die someday. We can believe in immortality, but in nature, no one is immortal anyway. This is the reality that not only every birth will end, but also by the law of cause and effect, all of these mental phenomena in this investigation must be explainable by a certain cause and effect. There is nothing coming out from nowhere like a miracle. Life consists of body and mind. The body is composed of organs and body cells, while the mind is composed of collective mental phenomena within the central nervous system of neurons. Each component of life functions as a part of nature under the law of nature, that is, in dependence upon a certain activity arises a specific condition. There must be a certain process that causes an associated state of mind to arise, and by collecting sufficient information from the insight observation, then we can derive the great knowledge of how the system of life is operating, and then we will be able to develop a proper strategy, the threefold study strategy, namely morality, mind, and wisdom development to make an end of suffering in life rightly. From component-based perspective, life can be defined in the five aggregates of being, namely the aggregation of body, form, the aggregation of feeling, the aggregation of perception, the aggregation of volitional formations, and the aggregation of consciousness. Life is just an aggregation of some things putting together under a boundary of connected components of the system of information of individuality. By having very closer look in this investigation, we can realize that all components of the system of life share the same common characteristics in nature, that is, it will arise and fade away, saying every birth will end up with death anyway. Life and everything in the world and universe are impermanent because the life system is dynamic and it keeps on changing at all times. Life is deteriorating because at any point in time when making an observation on it, just for a while that particular state will fade away. And life is no self because it is just a part of nature functioning under the law of nature, so it is not a self. Although each component may function as a subunit in the system, but there are some connections and communications among all of them to work together as a system in which the mind can be defined in terms of a specific series of states of mind, so-called the mind processing. The mind processing is a reflection of how the signal is processing along various brain pathways and neuron networks in the central nervous system. Typically, if we can determine an architecture of the operating system of the mind processing, then we can model the mind as a system and make a prediction on what is going to happen in advance when detecting an arising specific state of mind. The structural analysis of the mind and life system, the process of dependent origination. Next, we will investigate on how life will communicate with the world. The interfacing channels between life and the world consist of 6 sensory organs, namely, the 6 sense bases. Typically, the mind functions in responding to receiving stimulus from the world in terms of signal processing starting when stimulus making contact at the 6 sense bases, and the mind will proceed a stream of consciousness acting as a being. By establishing mindfulness to trace the mind processing gradually, we can observe that in dependence upon the contact of stimulus to each particular group of sensory neurons at the 6 sense bases, arises feeling, the first immediate response of mind to the world. and starting a sensory consciousness at the beginning of the mind processing. At this circumstance, the mind will assume a self as being self-awareness to absorb the arising feeling with the craving for existence. And in case if the type of arising feeling is happiness, then arises the craving for sensual pleasure. On the contrary, if the feeling is painful, then arises the craving for extermination. After the starting of the mind processing, there is a series of following associated states of mind. In dependence upon craving there is pursuit. In dependence upon pursuit there is gain. In dependence upon gain there is decision-making. In dependence upon decision-making there is desire and lust. At this moment, the mind is fully dominated by the existence of self, and then the whole mind processing clings or be attached to such an assumption of self, and we call this situation the five aggregates, the whole mind processing, subject to clinging. Once the mind is fully dominated by the five aggregates subject to clinging, in dependence upon attachment, clinging, there is possessiveness. In dependence upon possessiveness there is becoming to existence in the process of dependent origination. The birth of matter in the process of dependent origination. The aging and death in the process of dependent origination. Whatsoever the object of consciousness, or the signal processing, or the release of neurotransmitters, or mental phenomenon happening inside the mind will arise and fade away within a short period. In dependence upon aging and death, there is niggardliness, ignorance of the fact that the object of consciousness has already faded away. Those who do not know the truths of life within nature, that is, life is no self, so-called ignorance. Those who understand the truths of life within nature as the banishment of ignorance. Although the object of consciousness has already faded away, but due to the ignorance associated with the niggardliness of the five aggregates subject clinging, the mind establishes the consciousness with the production of new object of consciousness with the mixture of memory from latent dispositions for future renewed existence, and the mind acts as the source of internal name and form. In dependence upon ignorance, there is volitional formations in the process of dependent origination. In dependence upon volitional formations, there is consciousness as the internal source of the new production of the object of consciousness to flow within the mind. In dependence upon consciousness, there is internal name and form in the process of dependent origination. The internal name and form is sort of signal reflowing within the mind processing in the process of dependent origination. After the first round of the process of dependent origination, the volitional formations of thinking generate the varieties of unwholesome thoughts to drive the mind processing in the next round of the process of dependent origination. The unwholesome thoughts are the middle defilements of the five lower fetters, namely sensual desire, ill will, depression, anxiety, and doubt. As the process of dependent origination continues in many rounds of various volitional formations, and then the five lower fetters are aggravated into the rough defilements with greed, hatred, and delusion. Any action in responding to the world associated with greed, hatred, and delusion is evil doing, which will lead to sorrow, lamentation, pain, dejection, and despair come to be. Such is the origin of this whole mass of suffering in life. The description of this typical mind processing as the operating system of mind is called the process of dependent origination. The solution to make an end of suffering in life. The application of the Four Noble Truths on the process of dependent origination to liberate the mind, and to make an end of suffering in life. Problem statement. The origin of taints leads to the dysfunction of mind processing, then escalates to unwholesome thoughts, then is aggravated to be greed, hatred, and delusion before bursting out to take evil doing to the world that ends up with suffering. Root cause analysis. The root cause of the dysfunction of mind starts at the craving, clinging, and ignorance of the first round of the process of dependent origination. Goal: the disruption of the continuity of the process of dependent origination will liberate the mind from any emotional object of consciousness. Action Plan: the Noble Eightfold Path is the action plan to be taken to resolve this problem, namely the right mindfulness, the right concentration, the right effort, the right view, the right intention, the right speech, the right action, and the right livelihood.